Welcome back to the Real Radar Radio Show. As part of the 31 Nights of Halloween, it's gonna be a blast. I am back. It is October 5th, and it is a brand new episode. I'm truly excited. I'm dead serious excited because I have been very consistent, super proud of myself. 5 days in a row, doing this episode, doing the show, bringing you guys, my end of the bargain, my end of the promise. 31 Nights of Halloween, back-to-back episodes, new episode every day throughout the whole month of October. This has been by far the most active I've been on the podcast, and I'm pretty sure the podcast is freaking out because I have never done 5 back-to-back episodes, let alone I've never done like 3, but nonetheless, it's a lot of fun. I saw something on Facebook that I wanted to talk to you guys about that a lot of people would probably agree that it's a lot of fun to hear and to talk about. So I saw that somebody suggested that Netflix should make a show based on the 13 ghosts from the movie 13 Ghosts. They should do like a backstory for each ghost. So somebody, I guess, I don't know if this is the actual backstory for the 13 ghosts or somebody made up the backstory for each individual ghost, but I have in front of me right here the backstory and or the origin for these said characters, the 13 ghosts, each and every backstory and each and every story associated with each character. And they're referred to as the 13 Ghosts of the Black Zodiac. Now, the 13 Ghosts of the Black Zodiac is a very compelling story for each character. And each character is given, their counterpart. Seeing that each character is just that much more interesting. You want to know what would have happened to these characters, or how it became that they are who they are now. And if you guys don't mind, I'd like to share the 13 Ghosts of the Black Zodiac with you guys, starting off with the firstborn son. Billy Michaels was a bratty little boy who loved pretending to be a cowboy. One day, a neighbor kid challenged Billy to a duel, but unfortunately, Billy's toy gun was no match for the real steel-tipped arrow the neighbor used, which he shot through the back of Billy's head, causing his death. In comparison to the rest of the ghosts, Billy is a mild threat and doesn't attack anymore. He simply says, "I want to play." Ooh, that's chilly. That's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember that little kid with a little, Indian feather in the back of his head, and he has a long sleeve, and he's got that big-ass gaping hole from his forehead. Yeah. The firstborn son. I mean, some of these, character, discussions may not be a lot, but I think it gives you like a good idea of which character, how they ended up to become the way they are, and how they became 13 Ghosts of the Black Order. And it just seems that much more comforting to know that some of these characters may actually have a backstory to it, and it sounds pretty badass, if you ask me. We're moving on to the second ghost, known as the Torso. Jimmy the Gambler Gambino was a successful gambler in the early 1900s. He would spend his days at the track instead of attending school, and his nights gambling in rundown bars. Eventually, Jimmy opened a booking business, though he was unable to make his payoffs due to compulsive gambling, and quickly developed a reputation for never turning down a bet. Soon after, Jimmy caught the eye of mobster and madman Larry Finger Vitello, who bet quite heavily against him on a boxing match. Jimmy agreed to the terms and unknowingly sealed his fate. And after losing the bet, Larry and his gang cut Jimmy into pieces and wrapped his dismantled body in cellophane, which it's like the same thing, I guess, as like shrink wrap or like plastic wrap. Yeah, His remains were then dumped into the ocean, and he was never to be seen again. I gotta say, like, I don't know, maybe like the 13 Ghosts, this one's gotta be like the most like intriguing, because the book shows like there's a creature or a figure, with a head attached, long hair, and the body cut at like mid-level waist. But you watch the movie 13 Ghosts, and no, the torso has no head, no bottom half of the body, just arms, and a nub for where the head used to be. But I mean, nonetheless, it's really spooky, and it's like really like intriguing and really really nice to watch, or not watch, but like read about. The third ghost I want to talk about is the Bound Woman. Susan LeGros always had a privileged life. Her parents were the richest in town, which naturally added to her immense popularity at school. Be that as it may, Susan also had a defining flaw: toying with men. She used her beauty to flirt and play around with them, leaving many men heartbroken. Her friends warned that she should regret it one day, but of course she didn't listen. During Susan's senior year, she started dating the captain of the football team, Chet Walters. On prom night, Chet caught Susan with another guy and angrily clubbed her new boyfriend to death and tied Susan up. He strangled her with his tie, eventually breaking her neck. Chet buried Susan's body under the 50-yard line of their school's football field. And I gotta say, man, it's intriguing, because you read one that associated with the book, you watch the movie, and it's nothing to be, it's kind of miscrewed, because it just doesn't seem to be following the same book folklore, but it still gives you the most general consensus of the idea of the character, because it is then again brought to like the modern times for the time of the movie release, and it just makes that much more sense, because a lot of people can relate to that, because it targeted a certain demographic at the time the movie was released. So moving on to the fourth ghost, I want to talk about the Withered Lover. Jean Kritikos was a loving and devoted wife and mother. While she and her husband were sleeping in front of the fireplace, a stray log rolled out, setting the Christmas tree on fire, quickly sparking a house fire and panic. Her husband unintentionally abandoned her to save their children, wrongfully assuming Jean would make it out on her own. The left side of her face and body were badly burned. Jean was taken to St. Luke's Hospital, where she later died from her burns. And a lot of you people would remember that Jean Kritikos is the wife to Arthur Kritikos in the movie, who just happened to be his wife that perished in the fire that they had mentioned earlier in the film, and he keeps reminding and talking about throughout the film, who makes brief appearances also throughout the film. And you see that there is, deep regret in Arthur's actions and what he did to save the children, to make sure that the children were saved, and assuming that, Jean was able to save herself, but that wasn't the case. The fifth witch, I'm sorry. Wow, okay. I was looking at the word witch, and I was, okay. The fifth ghost I want to talk about is the Torn Prince. Royce Clayton was born in 1940. In high school, he was a very talented and very famous baseball player. He was even offered scholarships from numerous colleges. But at age 17, fate threw Royce a curveball when he met Johnny, a greaser who challenged him to a drag race. Unbeknownst to Royce, Johnny had cut a brake line in his car, causing him to lose control of the vehicle. Due to the accident, a large amount of flesh was torn off Royce's chest, and in addition to the right side of his face. His body was buried overlooking the baseball diamond where he once played. And if you guys remember the Torn Prince, I think he's the most, direct to book to screen adaptation accurate of how the character is actually portrayed from the book to the screen. And it just shows that much more that the ghost is actually more inclined to be more, I guess you could say, more, I don't know how to describe it, but more accurate to the book's depiction of, what people would think about the 13th ghost, in order. So this being the fifth ghost, I want to move on to the sixth ghost, the Angry Princess. And if you guys remember, the Angry Princess was the naked chick, the topless chick, who was, pretty much like following Shannon Elizabeth throughout the house in the movie. Okay. The sixth ghost, the Angry Princess. In the late 1900s, Dana Newman was considered a beautiful woman, but sadly was unable to recognize her own beauty. Her low self-esteem was driven even further by a series of abusive relationships. This led to her to go under plastic surgery, from breast implants to nose jobs and other unnecessary procedures. One night, Dana was alone in a clinic where she worked and decided to perform a surgery on herself. This botched experiment went horribly wrong, leaving her blind in one eye. Afterwards, she gave up on beauty and she committed suicide in her bathtub by cutting herself, with a butcher's knife, eventually bleeding to death. When her body was found, Dana's loved ones described her as being beautiful in death as she was in life. In the movie, the Angry Princess is seen in a bloody bathtub, which would more than likely indicate that she did take her own life inside a bathtub. But then again, these stories may have been written, just to coincide what was more obvious in the book / movie, to kind of make it seem more appealing to people who want to read more insights on these. Given if it's true, I'm not too sure. The seventh ghost I want to talk about is the Pilgrimess. During colonial times, Isabella Smith sailed to North America in search of a better life. She settled in a New England town, but was ostracized by the tight-knit community who didn't trust outsiders or foreigners. Isabel was labeled a witch when the town's livestock began to mysteriously die shortly after her arrival. She denied these accusations, but after a preacher fell ill, the townsfolk retaliated by burning her barn. But Isabel emerged from the fire completely unscathed. She was then sentenced to a slow and painful death in the stocks, where she was stoned by kids, cursed by women, and spat on by men until she eventually died, weeks later of starvation. And if you guys remember the Pilgrimess, she was one that was bound in the stocks and the chains. In the movie, she had the long scraggly, frayed hair, and the evil dead looking face with the white eyes, and it was just bizarre. It's crazy. The next ghost I want to talk about is the Great Child and the Dire Mother. Margaret Shelburne was very petite, 3 feet in height to be exact. Her own mother would even dress her up like a doll. Because of her small stature, Margaret was never able to stand up for herself. People would constantly stare and pick on her. Margaret joined Jimbo's carnival as a way of seeking acceptance, but found life as an attraction to be just as cruel. One night, when she was sweeping the donkey pen, another carnival freak, named the Tall Man, attacked her and raped her, causing her to give birth to her illegitimate child, Harold. Margaret consistently spoiled her son, resulting in Harold never outgrowing the diapers and being spoon-fed as a fully grown adult. Due to Harold's infant mindset, he was constantly taunted and teased. One night, some of the freaks at the carnival kidnapped his mother as a cruel joke. In an enraged search for his mother, Harold ransacked the carnival, but when he found his mother, it was too late. She had suffocated in a bag where they had kept her. Harold went ballistic and killed the circus freaks responsible for responsible with an axe, as well as others who were not involved. He was then put their remains on display for paying customers. When Jimbo the Carnival Barker, who hired Margaret and Harold, found out, he ordered an angry mob to mutilate Harold's body as punishment. That's got to be like the longest description for one of the ghosts in the movie. And it's kind of like playing off on one another, because you can actually see the comparison between both characters and the way that the story unfolds for this duo, because the story just seems to prolong itself, and it just seems to make much more sense because it gives us an actual not lifestyle, but a backstory that somebody can actually relate to. And when you read this backstory, you're kind of envisioning, the mob chasing him, or him killing, other people and tried to get retaliation for his mother. And, what you see in the movie is just, her spoon feeding her son, and, he's really enthralled, and he's a big boy. But at the same time, that's a mama's boy, and, he's going to do anything he can or he wants for his mom. The next ghost I want to talk about is the Hammer. George Markley was an honest and hard-working blacksmith until a man named Nathan falsely accused him of stealing and threatened to exile him from their old western town. Knowing he was innocent, George refused to leave and stood up to Nathan. One day, while walking home from the town market, his wife and children were beaten to death by Nathan and his band of thugs. That's when George decided to take matters into his own hands, literally, in a fit of rage. George tracked down Nathan and his friends and mercilessly beat them to death with a sledgehammer. The town soon discovered what George had done and chained him to a tree and drove railroad spikes into his body with his own sledgehammer, causing his slow demise. As a finishing touch, the townsfolk cut off his hand and put George's sledgehammer in its place. Now, if you guys remember the Hammer in the movie, he was this huge, bulking, brooding guy who had a sledgehammer for a hand, and he had his whole body covered in nails and, these huge spikes coming out of his body. And it seemed pretty badass, but I mean, the makeup was on point. They made him look pretty, atrocious and pretty, fearful. So it was a really, really nice touch. The next ghost on the list is the Jackal. Ryan Kuhn was born to a prostitute in 1887. He grew up to develop a sick and uncontrollable taste for women, attacking, raping, and murdering strays and of prostitutes in the dead of night like a madman. He voluntarily sought treatment at the Bournewood Asylum, where he eventually went utterly insane. He would violently scratch at his cell walls, causing his fingernails to completely tear off, making his hands look like claws. The doctors decided to put him in the solitary confinement where Ryan attacked a nurse. The straitjacket they used on him was fastened so tight that when Ryan acted out, it would horribly contort his limbs. Nonetheless, Ryan gnawed through it, and the doctors locked his head in a cage-type helmet and locked him in a deep, dark basement cell. He grew a hatred of humanity, and whenever approached would cower and scream madly. When a fire broke out at the asylum, Ryan refused to leave while everyone else escaped. He accepted his deserted fate and died in the fire. And the Jackal is one of the scariest ones in the movie. And I think it serves out pretty good. It kind of looks like a young Linda Blair, but in a straitjacket with a cage as a helmet. But that's kind of cool. The next ghost I want to talk about is the Juggernaut. Horace the Breaker Mahoney was abandoned by his mother after birth and raised by his father. As a kid, he was constantly shunned and became an outcast due to his grotesque height and appearance. Mr. Mahoney gave Horace a job at his junkyard chopping and crushing old cars. After Mr. Mahoney's death, Horace was left all by himself and went insane as a result of not having any guidance. He became a serial killer, picking up stranded motorists and hitchhikers to take back to his junkyard. He would then rip his victims apart with his bare hands, feeding the remains to his dogs. This preferred method of killing is what earned him the nickname The Breaker. Little did Horace know that his seventh-to-be victim was an undercover cop who had a SWAT team surround his junkyard to arrest him. Despite all this, Horace managed to break free of his handcuffs and kill 3 officers before being shot down by SWAT officials. This has got to be the most thorough one because it just seems that much more believable. I mean, you see this one and it's just believable. I mean, he's got the bullet wounds, he's got the tattered clothes, he's got like the decaying skin, and it just seems, that much more impressive. The 13th and final ghost, the Broken Heart. Arthur Kritikos was a math teacher, a loving husband, and a father of 2. He was deeply heartbroken after his wife Jean died in a fire. After her death, he and his family were forced to move into a cramped apartment. One day, Arthur was visited by a lawyer who claimed his Uncle Cyrus had been killed and left him a mansion. Soon after, the family decided to move into the mansion where, unbeknownst to them in prison, human souls are trapped in a bottom cell. Arthur is the 13th and final ghost of the Black Zodiac. His ghost was supposed to die while leaping into the core of Basilius' machine out of an act of pure love to save his children. He was chosen by his Uncle Cyrus to serve as the Broken Heart, the 13th and final ghost. And I gotta say, guys, given that these stories have like a background and a set setting for them to be considered, I guess, I don't know, given these like backstories, it seems badass because a lot of people have, wanted these characters to have their own backstories. And I think that even if they were written by a fan or somebody who took the time to actually think about these, I gotta say, it was very well written. It was very well approached. I feel like while reading these, I feel like I could, envision that these timelines and these, stories that add up, I can see it happening to them and seeing how it, it all unfolds for them. I guess, and that's what just makes the whole story, each story, individual for each character, that much more interesting. I mean, I couldn't picture it possibly any better myself because I just think that it's way better. It's more intriguing, and the list goes on for further, involvement or further stories to be presented for each and every character. If you were to look more into it, I mean, and if you do have the opportunity to do that, I encourage you guys to research the 13 Ghosts of the Black Zodiac. Look into it, see what these stories tell you, and maybe there's so much more information that I just didn't get a chance to read. I mean, it would be so much more awesome to know that there's so much more to be known about these characters. But in the meantime, thank you guys for listening to the 5th episode of the 31 Nights of Halloween. I had a lot of fun. I am looking forward to the next few episodes. Episode 6 comes out tomorrow. You guys were going to enjoy it and love it. It's been a roller coaster of things up and down, and I'm enjoying the ride, man. I'm on a roll. I mean, I'm already going to start the 6th episode, and I still got to edit this one and put it all together. So, fun. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next episode. It's going to be a doozy. A doozy? Why did I say doozy? It's going to be fun. Just forget about the whole fucking doozy thing, okay? Shit. Doozy. He said doozy. I don't know. This is the Real Radar Radio Show.